Hi dear homespun friends, it is Sherry and it is great to see you today. I hope this video finds you all doing well. I decided to come along today and share with you some daily bread and some daily bread. And I know that sounds a little bit odd, but I'll tell you what I'm talking about. Yesterday, I was researching some brand new like sandwich bread type recipes that I could try in my kitchen. And I came across one that is absolutely fantastic. And you make it in your bread machine. I know that many of us have bread machines. I've stopped using mine quite as much. I do a lot of my bread making now, or almost all of it by hand. I knead by hand. I don't even use my KitchenAid very much. I just do it all by hand. But it is a little bit tiring and time consuming. And if the bread machine can work for us, then it's a whole lot better off if we can use it. Now, I don't always love baking my bread inside of my bread machine. It will work just fine, but for this particular recipe, even though you can make from start to finish the entire loaf in your bread machine, I just made the decision to set my bread machine to dough and let it rise on the initial rise, then take it out and finish it up in my oven. And I'll tell you how I did that. Now, there's no need for me to even go into the kitchen to tell you this recipe because it is super simple. And I will put the recipe in the description box below so that you guys can try it out. So pull out those bread machines and let's get started. Whether you do the entire loaf in your bread machine or just take it to dough and do the rest by hand, you're going to love the outcome of this bread. Now, these are the simple ingredients that you use. 1 cup of milk. Now, this is the secret because milk and cream really help this bread to be super rich and delicious and soft. I can't even describe what it's like. It's different than any other kind of bread I've ever made. So because I'm thrilled about it, I want to share it with you. So 1 cup of milk, a 1/3 cup of half and half. You can use another 1/3 cup of milk if you don't have half and half, but I think you're going to want to get the half and half because it's very good. 3 tablespoons of softened butter. You can either use salted or unsalted, it doesn't matter. 3 3/4 cups of bread flour. I love bread flour. I did not use any of my home ground flour in trying this out this time. I just used it right here according to this recipe. Of course, I like to use King Arthur flour if I'm like the bread flour, if I'm going to be making something just with flour off the shelf. And so, but you use the brand that you want to use. But I personally like King Arthur bread flour. Sometimes it's a little bit more expensive, but I find that it's worth it because it's just so soft. 3 tablespoons of sugar, 1½ teaspoons of salt, and 1½ teaspoons of yeast. You're just going to toss all those ingredients into your bread machine and turn it on. That's it. And it will come out so good. Now, what I do is I set my bread machine to the dough cycle on my machine, which I can't remember if it's like a Sunbeam. I'm trying to remember the name of it. But it is number 8. It just has like the dough option and it lasts about an hour and a half. So it does all of that kneading work for me. I don't have to do any of the kneading. And then it allows the bread to have its first rise and it beeps at 1½ hours. What I do at that point is I take the dough out in a ball. I don't really knead it. I just might turn it and push down on it, maybe 3 turns or 4 turns to get it kind of consistent and looking pliable there. And then I pat it out just like in a little rectangular shape and I roll it like a log. It might only roll like 3 times because it's pretty thick. You don't press the bread out too thin, just press it down a little bit and then roll it into a log shape. Tuck the ends in and put it inside of a buttered loaf pan to rise. And I let my bread rise another 45 minutes to about 1 hour and 15 minutes. Last night I got busy and I was helping my husband on the patio do something and I lost track of time and I actually let my bread rise for about 1 hour and a half. It was pretty tall, but it turned out great anyway. So you can play with the time there in the rising. Anywhere from 45 minutes to 1 hour and 15 minutes is probably ideal. How I let my bread rise is I cover it with not saran wrap, but that press and seal wrap that Glad makes. That I love that stuff. And I should have brought it in here and let you see it, but I bet many of you have seen it before and probably even have some, because when you pull that off of your bread, it will not cause it to collapse. That's what I love about it. And I don't even butter it. I just lay it on top of my bread, and I actually put that pan inside of my oven with the oven light on. It just gives it a slightly warm, draft-free place to rise. And then I take the bread out, of course, take that wrapper off. I set the oven to 375 and let it preheat. And then I bake that bread anywhere from 30 to 40 minutes. Now, I know that seems like a wide window. In my particular small wall oven, it takes about 32 minutes for it to be done. But I don't know what your oven is like, so just be checking it out. The first time or two that you make it, you might just want to keep an eye on it. Your house is going to smell amazing. And let me show you the crumb on this bread. It's fantastic. And this is with me letting it rise a little bit too much, but look at this. I mean, I can't even tell you how beautiful this is, or how, in person, or how great it tastes. It is just so good. My husband said last night, this is the best bread you've ever made. So he says that frequently, but this really is a great bread. It turned out, as you can see, it's just perfect. It almost looks like a loaf you would buy at the grocery store, and it kind of reminds me of a very fresh loaf of bread. So I will put this recipe down there below. Give it a try. Like I say, some people, the woman who wrote this recipe just did the whole thing in her bread machine from start to finish and said it turned out fantastic. So I'm thinking that I just might try that next time, letting the whole thing stay in my bread machine for the entire cycle. I think it takes my machine about 3 hours to run and bake that full cycle of bread. And I might just see what the comparison is compared to just doing the dough cycle and finishing it up on my own on my counter or in my lit oven that's not turned on. So we'll see what happens as I work and compare these two methods. Let me know in the comments below if you have a bread machine and if you use your bread machine. For many years, I used a bread machine every other day. When my children were small, that's how I primarily made my bread. And I made a lot of bread in those years. And sometimes I would use the dough cycle, take the dough out, shape it into like hamburger buns and hot dog buns, sub rolls, and things like that for us to eat. You really can do a lot of the shaping of your bread in the style that you want and have what you need. And in these days when the world is so upended and we aren't really sure what's happening the next day, it's nice to have some skills. And that's why I continue to work at making bread and trying breads at home in different styles and different ways, because I want to be able to provide that for my family if I can't get to the store for bread, or perhaps there may be a time when we run out of bread. I know here in the South, when it snows or there's a threat of any kind of ice, the bread aisle is completely empty. I mean, within 10 minutes, it's just like all of it's gone. Milk and bread, milk and bread. Everybody runs to the store to get those things. But I really haven't bought store-bought bread now in quite a while. Several months, I guess, maybe since Christmas. I might have bought 1 or 2 loaves to fill in when I was short of time. But primarily we eat bread that I make at home, and we really, really like it. So let me know if you have a bread machine, and I will be sure to let you have this recipe. Now, in addition to talking about this bread that is food for our bodies, I want to talk a little bit about the bread that is food for our souls. And that is the living bread out of God's Word. And I know that I shared with you last month a beautiful devotional book that I had when I was talking to you about our oldest son. I showed you the book that I had gotten from Ollie's. It was $4.99, and I talked about the devotions in there being so meaningful for me. I keep that devotional book right near the area where I film for you, and that's right next to my kitchen. And so whenever I'm waiting for that bread to rise, or whenever I'm waiting for the water to boil, or whatever I'm doing, I pull out that devotional book and I read it. It's nice to have a devotional book in your kitchen or right off your kitchen, so that if you have a few extra moments while you're waiting for something to happen in your kitchen, then you will have God's Word right there with you to give you encouragement for your day. Most of the time when I'm cooking or baking in the evening hours, I'll go in there, sit down at the dining room table, pull out that devotional book, and read the devotion for that day. And I'm always amazed at how much it speaks to my heart for that very moment that I'm going through at the time. And so I keep that devotional book in there, but I have a brand new devotional book that I have been using over the past couple months right next to my bed. And I think it's one of my favorite devotional books that I've ever used. And I wanted to share it with you in case you wanted to pick it up. And it is called Mornings with Jesus. Looks like this. It's 365 devotionals for daily encouragement for the soul. And this comes to you by Guidepost. I was going to see if it has Guidepost on it. May not, but it does down there. This is Guidepost, and I love Guidepost. I think it's such a wholesome, they put out very wholesome materials. I would say a wholesome company. I don't know so much about them as a company, but I do know they put out wonderful, wholesome materials, and so I would have to assume that they are a great company, and I love their fiction is fantastic. And the devotional books that I have read that they put out is fantastic. And this one has become one of my favorites. Now, I received in the mail a little envelope, and when I opened it up, it said, "We would like for you to try Mornings with Jesus, the devotional book for the year." But it didn't come to me until maybe sometime around the 1st of April. And the little book that they sent me was a 1-month-long book for the month of May. And I started reading it on May 1st, and by the 3rd or 4th, I had ordered the entire devotional book, and it was only like $9.99. I think at the first of the year, when you ordered it at the beginning of the year, it might have been like $12.99, but since several months had passed, they were offering it for a discount at $9.99, and it was well worth the money. And I'll show you inside that the devotion material is dated with the name of the day on it, like here, Monday, February the 15th or 13th. Sorry, you couldn't see that. But, if you just wanted to disregard the Monday part and just look at it as February the 13th, you could use this devotional book on and on and on throughout the years. It doesn't have to be 2023. You could just, of course, next year on February the 13th, it will not be a Monday, so you might have to ignore that part. But, here it is, Valentine's Day, February 14th, and the devotion material will be there for you, so you could use it again or pass this along to a neighbor or a friend who might like to use it, someone who might not otherwise get a devotional book, and, pass that around and share it. My mom is very good about reading devotional materials again and again. And she says, what's amazing is I can read it sometimes 3 years in a row, and it's new to me each day that I read it. Like, it comes back around, and you've forgotten what that devotional said last year on this day, but it still speaks to your heart. And that is so true about devotional books. So I would like to share with you one of my favorite ones that I've read since I got this book, and it just so happens that it was on my wedding anniversary. We had our 39th wedding anniversary on the 13th. That's what I'm trying to say. And so I wanted to read that devotion to you because it meant a lot to my husband and me. I read it to him, and he enjoyed it, and so I'll share it with you. Now, each one of these is written, it appears to be written by a different woman, and I have just... I've enjoyed the fact that it's so varied in the types of material that's offered. Also at the bottom, it has something called a faith step, and that's an activity that you can do or a thought that you might consider as the day goes on that actually puts this devotion in action. So this one is Saturday, May 13th. The Lord himself goes before you and will be with you. And that's out of Deuteronomy 31:8. Spring was pushing up through the remnants of a long Midwest winter. We had recently moved from our home in Arkansas to this house in Indiana. I'd never experienced so many months of cold weather, but this morning I noticed miniature daffodil buds brightened my flower bed. Nearby, tulip shoots showed their greenery too, and I couldn't believe it. Gifts of nature that my Savior knew would surprise and delight me when I doubted. I love the first signs of spring bulbs. When crocuses poke through the dirt, I anticipate daffodils soon to come. When those emerge, I know tulips are on their way. I've always wanted a plethora of them, but we'd never stayed in the same house long enough to get them well established in our yard. When our family made this big out-of-state move, we felt Jesus leading us to this area and to this specific property. But through the long, cold months, my faith grew as frozen as the ground. Now, seeing my favorite flowers were already planted there, just waiting to greet me, was confirmation that we were right where Jesus wanted us to be. I wanted to know what was beneath the surface of our current experience, asking Jesus for a tomorrow that bloomed brighter. These simple spring flowers would grow into perennial faith anchors to thaw any doubts I may have. Take heart this morning. Jesus knew those bulbs would surprise me come spring. Jesus has blessings in store for you too. And this was written by Aaron Keeley Marshall. And the faith step at the bottom says, seal a written prayer request in an envelope with a date to open it in 1 year. Watch how God moves in you and in the situation that you're in. You may be surprised. I loved that one. And my husband said, we need to do that. We need to put something in an envelope that we can read next year to see how God has worked in our prayer request and in our lives from this moment to that one in 1 year, how God is always working and what a blessing it is. So that devotion, I know that was from, let's see, I guess it was almost 2 weeks ago now, but that was a joy for me to read that particular day. I love this book and wanted to share it with you because I was thinking that some of you may like to check into this book too, Mornings with Jesus. Friends, it is always great to spend time with you. And like always, I look forward to seeing you again next time. I love you all. God bless you. Bye-bye.